How are we doing, everybody? Welcome into the SFS channel. In this episode, we're going to be diving into some Week 10 trade advice, jumping right into the wide receiver position and talking through 5 names that I see as nice buy low candidates or must-have players for the rest of this year. I think these guys could be ascending assets here as they've seen kind of a steadying out of their production or a drop-off in production, whatever the case might be. I think that their stock is definitely not as high as we could see it fly down the stretch of this year, and I want to be taking advantage of some of these last few weeks here to make fancy trades and acquire these players for my roster. So as always, if you guys are new around here, feel free to drop on down, smash the subscribe button, turn the bell on so you're never late for a new piece of content. I'm posting trade episodes like this every week until the trade deadline here for 2022, as well as start sit videos, waiver wire pickups, lessons learned episodes, and a whole lot more. So feel free to stick around here, you guys. Check out future episodes, and let's dive right on into today's video. All right, I want to start off today's episode talking through a player that I've seen a lot of questions arise in our community Discord server. Of course, if you've not joined that and are not a part of that yet, feel free to drop down in the description of today's episode and use the link down there to join that. As soon as I add you into the server, you will have the ability to chat with anyone in there, ask me questions, all that great stuff. So Amon-Ra St. has been a very popular topic of conversation amongst the SFS community as of late, and I get it. This is a player that has not seen his ceiling numbers pop since week 2, and as a matter of fact, you've seen pretty much a declining level of production from him since that point in time, and he hasn't really provided, again, any ceiling value to lineups since very early in this season. Now, he's dealt with a couple of injuries throughout this year. Of course, he had the ankle injury that really hampered him in the middle part of the season as it relates to the season that we've had unfold so far. And then lately, he had that concussion as well, which is pretty much a couple weeks behind us now. So we shouldn't really be thinking about these things at this point in time. And going forward, it's just a simple question of why has Amon-Ra St. not produced the lineup value that we're looking for? The opportunity is still there. He's got 19 targets in the last 2 weeks. He's a player that has consistently, this past week, he comes out and has 7 receptions. He's just not scoring touchdowns. That's been the one thing that's really held him back from flashing those numbers we saw in the fantasy playoffs in 2021 and the guy that had 3 touchdowns in the first 2 weeks of 2022 fantasy football. So in short order, am I panicking here? Absolutely not, but there are a lot of players doing so. So you can continue to take advantage of this as a buy low move if you have the resources to go out there in a PPR format. That's where I think that Amon-Ra St. is most viable, of course. Half PPR, he's still doing very solid as well. Standard leagues, if you're really concerned about the touchdown production, maybe stay away. But this is a player that I think is really, really solid as a slot wide receiver. He's going to soak up volume and targets on a week-to-week basis and be a guy that is consistently heavily involved in this offense. The arrow is only pointed upward for Amon-Ra St. from here going forward. There's no more TJ Hockenson in this offense. This is an offense that has had DeAndre Swift consistently struggling to stay healthy on the field, getting consistent targets on a week-to-week basis. This team needs him more now than ever, and he is the clear number 1 wide receiver. Jameson Williams has yet to step on the field here for this team. There is a clear-cut path to Amon-Ra St. every single week being the top target leader for this team, being the player that has the most opportunity to have fantasy success, the highest floor. He checks every box here. So, except for the touchdown category, which we've seen it happen before. This team just has to get moving the football down the field and continue to put up points for lineups here. So, I'm not worried about Amon-Ra St. I hope that you guys aren't either, and hopefully he just gets his production on track in terms of producing those ceiling numbers, which have created a rather lengthy buy low window, which I did not expect to be the case here when we started putting him in these episodes a couple of weeks back, but this just adds fuel to the fire in terms of the opportunity level to go and acquire him. Mike Evans here. Chris Godwin could potentially be tossed into this conversation as well, but this is a player that this Tampa offense right now is another one that's just the opportunities are there. You're seeing a high level of potential for production, and it's just not coming to fruition. So for Mike Evans, I pulled some crazy stats here. So first and foremost, on Sunday afternoon, the NFC divisional round rematch between the Rams and the Buccaneers, Tom Brady, at 45 years old, threw 58 passes, nearly 60 passing attempts in a 4-quarter regulation game from a quarterback that netted 16 points. That's unprecedented. You're seeing I would honestly be extremely interested in putting this up to other larger sample size bodies of work from quarterbacks. This could be some historically low inefficiency in the passing game from any NFL team because they're not putting points up. This is not a team that's scoring as a high octane offense. They are really unbuttoned right now. They don't look sharp. Their routes look untimed. Receivers like Mike Evans are having costly drops. Chris Godwin's been in that category as well. Scotty Miller had a terrible one that potentially could have cost this team the game. There are a lot of things that need to get better and need to change for this Tampa offense. But the bottom line is that the opportunities, the weekly target involvement, the potential to score points is there when that many passing attempts are on the table, and this level of target volume is heading to multiple receivers every single week. Chris Godwin is a player, we'll get to Mike Evans here in just a second, that has 62 targets in his last 6 games. Mike Evans, a player we typically have thought of in the past as the lower volume option in this offense, the guy who is more so just the red zone option for this team. Spoiler alert, he has not had a touchdown in a very, very long time here. He has 2 touchdowns on the season, 2 touchdowns in his last 6 games. He has 3 total on the season. Mike Evans has 59 targets in his last 6 games. So 62 for Godwin, 59 for Mike Evans. That's nearly 10 targets per game for Evans and over that threshold for Chris Godwin. The efficiency, the touchdown production, it's not there for either of them. Godwin hasn't scored a touchdown this whole season. And like I said, Evans, a guy who we think of as a perennial double-digit touchdown scorer, has 3 total on the year. So you're looking at numbers that are incredibly disappointing. You want to see this be higher than the production has been as of late. But again, if you can cling on to and believe in that bottom line of target opportunity, that is where the buy low could potentially come to fruition here and deliver numbers down the stretch. I'm really excited for when Tampa can really start to retool here and hopefully clean things up with bye weeks coming up and whatnot. So get your stuff together here. Hopefully they can reel some stuff in, figure out what works offensively, and move forward into the rest of this season as a higher level of production capability offense, obviously bringing us more lineup numbers to the table. T. Higgins, another player that he is entering the bye this week, so we've immediately already got that first, qualifier for a buy low candidate. The fact that desperate teams, there are teams in win now mode that need to make deals today in order to be viable this week. T. Higgins could potentially be one of those players. Second of all here, you've got a guy who is coming off of a very poor game script in terms of producing fantasy football success to the wide receiver position. This is a guy in T. Higgins who this past week, Joe Mixon literally would have beat the Carolina Panthers by himself. If there was no other offensive playmakers, he put up enough touchdowns on his own to carry this team the distance. Joe Burrow threw a touchdown pass to Joe Mixon in this game, 5 total TDs for him, and really everyone else was just kind of left hanging here. Tyler Boyd had a down game. T. Higgins had a very modest game, not cracking double-digit scoring in half PPR formats. So what you're looking at for T here is a guy that kind of in back-to-back games without Jamar Chase has not looked like the level of player we expected. The first one was simply a standout job by the Browns defense. Joe had no time to pass the ball downfield, and T, I called it a fluky touchdown reception. He just simply went up and mossed a guy, so I guess in that sense it wasn't fluky, but it saved his week, if you will, on one catch that ended up scoring him 6+ points there. This week he comes in and doesn't do that. He is very effective with the 7 receptions on 8 targets he had for 60 yards. However, again, no big plays there, no touchdowns. They didn't really need him to be a big-time playmaker and game changer, a difference maker, if you will, in this contest. So for T. Higgins, again, entering the bye week, coming off of some questionable performances here, I think there might be some doubt starting to circulate here. I think that you still got a player who, even after the bye, has 2 games without Jamar Chase. I'd be surprised or shocked, rather, to see him return anytime sooner than Week 13 against Kansas City. There's still a bye window here, and I do think that there's, of course, the high probability that he maintains fantasy relevance with Jamar Chase on the field. I would argue they may actually be better with each other out there because you really can't double either one of them legitimately, and especially in T. Higgins' case, they're going to offer that coverage up to Jamar Chase first and foremost. So there's a lot of chances here and a lot of opportunities, again, for T. Higgins to increase his stock and to push that needle further down the stretch of this season. It just hasn't really come to fruition to this point in the year. Allen Lazard, I really went back and forth with this one, but at the end of the day, analyzing the injuries taking place in Green Bay right now, the game scripts they're seeing every single week, this is a terrible football team. This is not a team in positions to lead games late, to salt away wins with the run game. They have to pass from behind literally every game. They're on a 5-game losing streak. Like, what else can we really tell ourselves at this point in time? to convince ourselves otherwise. This is a bad football team. They've lost to the likes of Taylor Heineke. They've lost to Daniel Jones. They've lost to Zach Wilson. They've just lost to Jared Goff. Like, all in consecutive matchups here, these are teams that the Packers are losing games to. Additionally, they just lost Romeo Doubs 4 to 6 weeks with a high ankle sprain injury. So you're talking about a player that was a high-level contributor for this team, 6 to 7 targets per week there. And now you're opening up that portion of the offense to a guy in Allen Lazard, in basically putting him in concrete as this team's number one wide receiver. So he had a poor catch rate this week, 4 of 10. He did go 87 yards and a touchdown, though, so he's capable of making plays. This is a guy that will have an impact on football games, despite the fact that he may not be a legitimate and true wide receiver 1. This is a safe weekly wide receiver 3, a flex level candidate if you need them, with some ceiling, because he is catching passes from Aaron Rodgers. Aaron's been struggling. This offense has been sputtering as a whole, but this is kind of the one thing, aside from Aaron Jones, when they actually give him touches, that seems to be working for this team. So no problem going out and buying Allen Lazard now with the developments we've seen and the changes that we've seen offensively to Green Bay the last couple of weeks, with guys dropping like flies and the fact that they are just continually in bad game script situations. Last up here, good old George Pickens. I have been so excited. I hated, long term, it might be for the best, but I hated that they had a week 9 bye. I wanted to see Pickens on full display immediately with no Chase Claypool in the offense, who's actually been seeing a healthy amount of opportunity in Pittsburgh's offense throughout this year. Now, of course, post-trade deadline, moved to Chicago. We'll talk about him in a different episode, of course, but that's a story for another time. George Pickens here, focusing on him, a guy with that level of involvement removed from this offense. It now becomes the Pickens and Deontay Johnson show. I am so excited. I think that there's a real opportunity here with the chemistry that Kenny Pickett and George Pickens have together for a real emergence and breakout. I think there is some real ceiling value here. And if you're looking for a big potential player at your wide receiver 3 or flex positions, maybe you've got multiple flex spots in your leagues, go buy George Pickens. I think that the production to this point in time in his career has shown flashes, but it hasn't warranted a super high trade price to the point where you're going to have to give up a lot to get him. So I'm currently scraping the phones right now, calling up all my league mates, asking what their going price is here for George Pickens, tossing out offers, trying to lowball as best I can here. But overall, I do think that this is an exciting buy low opportunity that I don't want to say this is a for certain thing, but there is league-winning potential here with this caliber of a player, level of a playmaker. Their offense needs to take a tick upward here post-bye week if that's going to be the case, but he has the talent. He has the opportunities, I think, going forward post-trade, expecting to see and projecting to see an uptick in his level of usage in this offense. A lot of stuff to be optimistic and positive about for George Pickens' fantasy value going forward. So there you guys have it. To recap, we're buying low on Mike Evans. We are buying low on Amon-Ra St. Brown, T. Higgins, Allen Lazard, and George Pickens for Week 10 fantasy football. Of course, if you have any questions, trade scenarios, drop it down in the comment section below or that community Discord server that we touched on early in today's episode. So thank you so much, you guys. I will see you in a future episode. Peace out.